Every summer, our family had this long-standing tradition of heading up to Lake Willoughby in Vermont. It wasn't one of those fancy, resort-style vacations. No. It was the kind where you packed coolers, board games, bug spray, and stayed in an old wooden cabin with a creaky porch and barely functioning Wi-Fi. But somehow, those rustic little trips ended up being the ones I remembered most. This year was supposed to be like every other, simple, relaxing, and full of laughter. Except it turned into something I never expected, something that stuck with me far longer than the scent of campfire smoke in my clothes. It was my mom, dad, younger brother Tyler, and me, Natalie. I was 17 then, on the edge of adulthood, which meant I had started to notice things more. My mom's strained smiles, the way my dad seemed constantly exhausted, and the family drama that was always just beneath the surface, like a splinter under skin. Joining us that year were my Uncle Rick and his son, Ben, who was around my age. Uncle Rick was my dad's younger brother. He worked as a mechanic back in upstate New York, had a booming laugh, and told great stories. But I always felt like there was something off about him. Maybe it was the way his eyes lingered a second too long when I walked into the room, or how he always tried to tickle me like I was still 10. The cabin had 3 bedrooms, and since Ben and I were closest in age, we were supposed to share the loft area upstairs. It had 2 beds, separated by a dresser and a small reading lamp, and the slanted ceiling made it feel cozy, at least during the day. At night, with the sound of the wind brushing against the windows and the distant howls of wildlife, the loft felt entirely too far from everyone else. I remember the first night vividly. I had trouble sleeping. Maybe it was the excitement, or just the old mattress springs groaning every time I turned. I lay awake, staring at the shadows cast by the moonlight, until I finally drifted off sometime after midnight. It was the second night when things started to feel strange. I had gone to bed early, tired after swimming most of the day. I was half asleep when I heard footsteps creaking on the stairs. Thinking it was Ben heading up, I turned over and pulled the blanket tighter. But the footsteps paused at the top of the stairs. I could feel someone watching me. My heart beat a little faster, and I held my breath. Then the person walked slowly over to my side of the room. The sound was so soft, but unmistakable. I squeezed my eyes shut and pretended to sleep. A second later, the person turned and walked away. The next morning at breakfast, I asked Ben if he'd come upstairs late last night. "No," he said between bites of toast. "I crashed downstairs watching a movie with Uncle Rick. Didn't even come up." That made me freeze. If it wasn't Ben, then who? My mind tried to make excuses. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe the house just creaked on its own. But that uneasy feeling didn't go away. I tried to brush it off. During the day, things felt normal again. We went kayaking, made s'mores, and even played a round of Pictionary that had everyone laughing until they were crying. Uncle Rick was in a great mood, telling some ridiculous story about his high school days. But every so often, I caught him glancing at me. It wasn't overt, just subtle enough that I might have ignored it if I hadn't already felt unsettled. That night, I stayed up late reading a book, determined not to fall asleep until I knew Ben was up in the loft. He came up around midnight, yawning and tossing his phone on his nightstand. "You good?" he asked, pulling off his hoodie. "Yeah," I lied. "Just tired." I waited until his breathing slowed and evened out before letting myself fall asleep. But sometime around 3 in the morning, I was jolted awake. There it was again, the creak of the stairs. My stomach dropped. This time, I sat up, clutching my blanket. "Ben," I whispered, but he didn't move. Then, from the shadows, a figure stepped into the faint light spilling through the window. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I knew it was Uncle Rick. I froze. He didn't say anything, just stood there, watching. After what felt like a full minute, he turned and left. The next morning, I didn't say a word to anyone. I kept trying to tell myself I was overreacting, that maybe he was just checking if we were asleep or something innocent. But deep down, I knew better. I started avoiding Uncle Rick. I made excuses to be outside, to stay around my parents, and not be alone. He didn't say anything directly, but I could feel the change in his energy, like he knew I was on to him. On the 4th day, While the rest of the family went out for a hike, I pretended to have a stomach ache so I could stay back. I wanted to pack my things and move my bed downstairs. But Uncle Rick stayed behind too, saying he wanted to fix the leak in the kitchen sink. The cabin felt way too quiet with just the two of us. I sat on the porch, trying to distract myself by journaling, but my hands were trembling. At one point, he came out to grab a soda from the cooler and stood next to me. "You okay, Natalie?" he asked, voice low. I didn't look at him. "I'm fine. You've been quiet lately. Something on your mind?" I wanted to scream at him, ask why he came into the loft at night. But all I said was, "Just tired." He gave a slight smile. "Well, get some rest while you can. These vacations fly by." That night, I told Ben I wanted to sleep downstairs. I made up a story about the mattress hurting my back. He didn't question it. I moved to the living room couch and stayed there the rest of the trip. On the last day, my parents were loading up the van, and I found Ben by the lake, skipping rocks. "You ever feel like something's off with your dad?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Ben squinted into the sunlight. "Sometimes. He drinks a little too much and says weird stuff, but he's harmless." "Why?" I just shrugged. "No reason." The ride home was silent. I watched the trees blur by, feeling both relief and confusion. Nothing had technically happened, but something had shifted. I no longer felt safe around someone I once called family. When we got back home, I told my mom. I didn't go into detail, just that I didn't feel comfortable around Uncle Rick, especially at night. She went pale, but she believed me. She always did. After that, things changed. Uncle Rick stopped coming to family events. My parents never said exactly what they told him, but I knew they'd confronted him. Ben messaged me once, saying he was sorry if his dad did something. I never replied. I didn't know how. It's been years since that trip. I still think about it sometimes, especially when I visit places that feel too quiet or too far from safety. But I learned something important that summer. Trust your instincts. Speak up, even when your voice shakes. And most of all, family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by respect, protection, and the space to feel safe. And I will never let anyone take that from me again.